Hello, Stampin' Buddies. It's Lori from Lori's Little Bit of Crafting. I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in the United States. And it's late. So Late Night Lori is coming to you on Tuesday, February 25th from the state of Wisconsin. And we are going to play with the tile techniques again. And this time we're going to work on something similar to this. So this uses some embossing, some heat embossing, and punch. And I wasn't really sure where some of the paper was from. We're actually going to kind of create this designed paper, if you can see that. And we're going to create colored paper for the bow or the bow. And we're going to use this punch. This is the bow punch, and that is in, I think, the current catalog. It's a current item anyway. We are going to use some new embellishments. These are the neutral matte dots that are a new item. We are going to use Everyday Skies paper, which is an online exclusive. And I've shown this before where there's just all kinds of like skyscapes. All right. And then on the back sides, you have some other more neutral designs. Okay. So Sarah Douglas, the CEO for Stampin' Up, actually had one of the concept artists on today. She does like a featured product every week on Tuesday afternoons in Central Time. It's on at 3 o'clock. She spends a few minutes just to highlight some new product or project. And this was one of the things they covered today. So the concept artist used, I think, oil paint to design her templates, off of which they made the designer series paper. Those are always kind of interesting to watch. We are also going to use this die from the Sentimental Park dies. This also comes with a stamp set. It's part of a bundle, but we're just going to use this for that sentiment. And we're actually going to have it going sideways. And let's see what else. We're going to use this, and we're going to use the sentiment from Linked Together. This is a new item. I don't remember if it's an online exclusive or I think it is. I just don't remember. There's so much new stuff that Stampin' Up! Keeps cycling through for us. You should never get bored with what you have available to work with. So we're going to use that. And we're going to use this and this. We haven't used this one before, so that's why I thought I'd try something that we haven't worked with. I had a couple of different color schemes that we were going to work with. This is the Copper Clay, which is an outgoing in color. So it ran from 23 and it will end in May of this year. They last for 2 years. So that may be a card for another time. We're actually going to do this one. We've got Azure Afternoon and Pretty in Pink, some different shades in there. And we're going to create the card. Now we could also do this side, but I thought that looked specifically feminine. So we're going to use the side that's got the blues and the pinks because I think I'm going to send this to somebody who I recently found out. A couple that we have that are going to have a baby. So I'm going to do this So Happy for You for them. So I don't like naked envelopes. I did this ahead of time just to kind of save some time. So that's just a strip that's 2.5 by 6. I put the glue on the flap, adhere it, and then I fussy cut around the edge to get my non-naked envelope. So I'm going to set that off to the side. And then I'm going to tell you about a resource that's available through demonstrators that if, like this card, if off the top of your head you don't know what designer series paper that is, or you don't know what sentiment that is, or you didn't know what punch that was, Stampin' Up! Has what we call recipes. And demonstrators have these available to them, and I can share them. But here is basically the recipe for this card, okay? So this card was actually designed as a note card. It's considered artfully avid, which means, you know, it's got punching and blending and the embossing. So a bunch of techniques that maybe a stamper who prefers a simple style will not be drawn to this particular card. Okay, so I like simple through really avid cards. I like variety, but I do like texture. So I guess I'm kind of drawn to some of the things that kind of step it up a little bit. So it tells us what stamps to use, what paper they used, what ink was used, what tools. Like here we need the blending brushes and the bow punch, or the bow punch. I think it's bow. And then for the embellishments, you know, the embossing powder, the antique pearls, that's another new item. So I am not using all of the colors from the recipe because the paper that I'm using is different from here, okay? So I'm winging it as far as the colors go. But at least I know, you know, we're using the bow punch from the Layering Leaves bundle. And then some embellishments, etc. All right. So first things first, we have a card base. This is my thick basic white. You've heard me mention it before, but I take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of my basic thick, or my thick basic white, or a colored cardstock that's a little heavier than just our basic white. I'll score it at the 4 1/4. All right, and that creates the score in the middle for what we would call a hamburger fold. Then I turn it and I cut it at 5 1/2. So you should be able to see here on my ruler, this is 5 1/2, and half of this at my score is 4 1/4. All right. That way I have two card bases with one score and one cut. All right. So work smarter, not harder. That's what I kind of tend to say. Okay. So we'll just burnish that so we have a nice crisp fold. And then this piece, based on the example that we're casing in the catalog, filled up the whole card front. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And unlike my last video, I don't have to wrap any ribbon around this. So we can indeed actually glue this down or use your Stampin' Seal or whatever your favorite adhesive is. All right. And this we will carefully place so it's on the whole front of the card. Now, if there happens to be any little overlay, we can just trim it off. But if you cut accurately, carefully, you should be all set. All right. So that's good to go. All right. I already ran my my oblong hexagon through Bossy Bessie, my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And that was just to kind of save time. All right. But we are going to pull in our piercing mat. Excuse me. And we are going to stamp that sentiment in Azure Afternoon. So I will take my ink to my stamp and hopefully it will look good. So happy for you. And you can tell I don't have my words lined up with the edge of my stamp because that's not how I do it. I usually have my block a little Kokolovich so that I'm actually lining it up with my words. All right. So then we'll just kind of chamois this off and we're done with that. This is a chamois that comes with the glass mat. So it's a bigger chamois than our other one, and it's much thinner, and it's more like kind of like a washcloth, but it works really awesome. All right, so we'll get that out of the way. So this is ready to go. I'm going to put some dimensionals on the back of here right away. I'm just not going to take the backings off yet. And then we're going to kind of talk through how I did my bows. All right, so I took a scrap of white and just with my various colors. So for this one, I'm just using 3. We're using Daffodil Delight, Pretty in Pink, and Balmy Blue, and then the Azure Afternoon as well. So I just used my blending brushes on my scrap of white and just started with my lightest color first. So I did the yellow, Daffodil Delight. I did the Pretty in Pink and did those edges. Then I did my Balmy Blue down here and the Azure Afternoon. And then I just took my punch and just randomly punched my shapes, okay? So I have 4 of those little pieces, and they just have this nice gradiated hue mix of colors. All right, we could do more, but I also wanted to just kind of test the embossing, so you should be able to see that on there. You could emboss first, and we're using white embossing powder. You could emboss first and then do your blending brushes, but then you'd have to wipe off your embossed image. So it's actually an extra step. So what I do is I simply do my blending first, and then I add my embossing afterwards. All right. So I have another piece. This should be 3 3/4. So 3 3/4 by 4 1/4, because per the sample, it's going to go all the way across our card. All right. So I'm going to just start blending with the lightest color, which is the Daffodil Delight. And we're just going to put some color in here random. It doesn't have to be super pretty. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. It's just going to be random. All right. And I just want some of the Daffodil Delight in there as kind of my sunshine. Okay. Then we're going to do some Pretty in Pink. And I try to start off on my paper first so I don't get a glut of color when I start doing my rotations with my blending brush. Because if I just start, you can see where that's really bright and harsh, okay? So I start to just kind of even out the color on my scrap or my background piece. I could do it on my mat, my glass mat as well, or if you use a silicone mat, you could do it on your silicone mat too. But if you just go off to the edge. Now, if you use your glass mat or your silicone mat, you can actually pick up some of the color when you need to add more. You can pick it up off your glass mat or your silicone sheet. All right, so we'll be done with those 2. Then we're going to do the Balmy Blue next, because that's the next darker color. And you can see I've got 2 different blending brush sizes. This is the regular one, and this is a mini one. You can do, you need to have some pressure on the head of the blending brush. So you can either use a finger, which is my preference, or you can use a thumb, depending on what works better for you. I find that using my index finger gives me just enough pressure. And then it makes a cool design here too. You could probably do that on some cardstock and make some kind of geometric card base or layer. All right, we'll add a little bit more in here of the balmy blue. And then last but not least, we'll do some Azure Afternoon. So this is the real simple, it's not going to take a whole lot of thought. I find using my blending brushes is kind of therapeutic. I really like using the blending brushes. I like the kind of very, the variations in the colors that you can get with using the blending brushes. So I think we'll just do that. That looks, we're happy you're having a baby-ish to me. All right. So I can see something here that when I cut this edge was probably cut like this. So I'm just going to kind of fingernail force that to go down. All right. So the next thing we're going to do now is emboss. We're going to get this set with our white embossing powder. And Stampin' Up! Now has, wow, embossing powder. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to use our embossing buddy. So the other day I mentioned that there is a tray. Let me just pull that over here. I have some things in my tray. Bear with me. All right, so this is called the Embossing Additions tool. So the tray, when you put your embossing powder in there, and I used gold in here, so I'm not actually going to use this today because I don't want to mix it. But you would do, and it comes with an embossing buddy, it comes with this reverse tweezers, it comes with the brush. I think that's it. I think it's those 4 tools. So the tray, the tweezers, the brush, and the embossing buddy. If there's something else that comes with it, I don't remember, but it's a nice tool to have. So once you do your embossing buddy, this has basically powder in it, okay? Powder, cornstarch, I'm not sure exactly what they put in. I don't care, it just works, all right? Sometimes you have to kind of just tap it down, depending on how much is coming out, okay? But what this does is it takes the static off of your paper or the ink, okay? Normally what I would do then is I would take the Versamark, I'd ink up my stamp, and I would do, you know, place the design on there. And then I would bring it over here and I would pour my embossing powder on the design and let the excess fall in here. And then when you're done, you just go like this, take off the cap, and you can pour all the excess back in whatever dish you're using or the jar that it comes in, okay? Since I have gold, I'm not going to actually use that today. I'll use it another time. So let's get our Versamark and let's ink this up. Now the Versamark is a clear ink. It's a slow drying ink. It's sticky. So that's why the plastic granules of the embossing powder will work on it. Okay. So let's make sure we're at about 2 1/8 because that is our halfway mark. So we'll go to about there. Now I could be using my piercing mat. I probably should be because this is a big design, but it worked. Now you may not be able to see that because of the light, but I can see that, all right? It is a very slow drying ink, so I have time to add some more Versamark to my stamp. Flip it over, And now we're going to do this side. And again, it's hard to see, so I'm just going to eyeball it to about 2 1/8, going the other way. So I flip my paper around, okay? Now, again, you're not going to be able to see that like I can probably, but here is where I don't have any Versamark design, and here is where I don't have any Versamark design, because I went like this, and then I turned it, and I went like this. So my next piece is going to be to take this corner one and put it in the areas that weren't covered by the design of that first stamp. All right. So I am just going to kind of hold this up, see where it needs to go, and then hope for the best. Okay. And it'll be fine. It will be just fine. All right. So this one is going to go right about there. And if it's not quite lined up, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't really matter. All right. So then we're going to pour our powder on here. And you can be pretty generous, because whatever doesn't stick to your paper is going to fall back into your jar or your paper or whatever it is you're working on. Okay. So the one thing that you want to avoid though is touching these edges, because you will rub the powder off. All right. And this is a design that would be ideal for that tray, because it's a bigger design and it gives you more area to work than just the little bucket that I got from Walmart. Okay, so you should be able to see, hopefully, all that white embossing powder on there. All right. Normally what I do though is I'm going to take my spoon out of here, and I'm going to cover this up, and I'm going to seal it, because Lori's sometimes gets a little messy. And I'm just going to flick this to get the excess off. All right. With the embossing buddy, there's not a whole lot of overlay from the powder, because it doesn't have the static. Okay. We'll get rid of that. And then I'm going to use my reverse tweezers, and I'm going to find a place that doesn't have powder, and I'm going to hold it. And that way I can keep my fingers cool while I'm embossing. Pardon the noise. All right. I like to heat mine from the back, and you don't have to move it around a whole lot, but you can see it, should be able to see it changing, hopefully. And as it heats up and melts, you can see it magically change from a matte finish to a nice shiny finish. Hopefully you can see that on the video, but it's pretty magical. My sister-in-law actually told me that when she first started stamping, this was one of the first things that she saw as a technique shown, and she just fell in love with it. And I can see why. It is just really a cool technique. And there are some other metallics that are available, so you can get different looks. But then what I'm looking for is I want all of that shiny. Because if any of it is a matte finish, it means that powder is going to come off. All right. And it all looks shiny to me. I'm just going to give it a little heat from the top then. That'll either blow off any loose powder, or it'll heat up any powder that wasn't melted. All right. So that's all the heat gun is that's all the heat gun is doing, is melting those plastic granules. All right. So this now can go here, and I'm just going to glue that down. And it's a little curved because of the heat gun from the back side. If I would have done it from the front side, it would have curled the other way. Excuse me. All right. We will just line this up. Make sure I don't have any powder on here. And I'm just going to try to center it from top to bottom. And it's going to fit across the whole face of the card because we cut it at 4 1/4, right? So that looks pretty good. That's a pretty slick look, eh? All right. Oh, and this brush is, if you had a design that wasn't quite so broad, you could brush extra powder off before you've embossed it. All right, once you've embossed it, it's all melted, so you're not fixing anything anymore. This is going to go here, but we're also going to add these. And I want these bow pieces to stand out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take these off. And I like to use my Take Your Pick tool because it makes it easier for me. All right. So then let's just start putting these on. And I may have to add a couple of more dimensionals, depending on where these sit. All right. And I could also add a little bit of glue to the top of this. Maybe I can add some glue. There we go. Because then I can just glue it like here, and it won't be stuck with a dimensional, but it will be still lifted up once we put it on the card. Does that make sense? And I'll do the same thing with this one, I think. I'll just put some glue instead. Because the dimensionals weren't everywhere. Okay. And I'm going to add one more dimensional there, just because I want to make sure this sticks. Okay. All right. Then this will go here. That looks pretty straight. And then we're going to put some of these matte dots on, and we're going to use the white ones. All right, so we'll just put a couple of these. Put a couple there. I'm going to use 5 of them, I guess. Oops. Usually I can just push it right off the edge of the plastic. And that one I think I'm just going to tuck under there just a little bit. Okay. So there is our cased card using that Tiled Techniques stamp set as the focal piece. We've got our envelope that coordinates so we don't have a naked envelope. And excuse me, here's my version of the catalog card. So we call that casing. So it's copy and share everything, or copy and slightly edit. So if somebody was looking at this in the catalog and saw my card, they probably would not even think that that's even the same design. But it's the same layout with just a couple little changes. So let me know what you think. If you like this card, you know, give me a thumbs up, share my video. You will also find me not only on Facebook, but on YouTube. There are some changes. So if my videos go more than 15 minutes, Facebook cuts them off. So that's why I'm putting them all on YouTube as well. And I appreciate if you share the video, like the video, give me some feedback on the video if you like the card. If you try the card, I would love for you to add your version to my Facebook post. I don't know if you can actually add pictures on the YouTube channel or not. So that's all I have for you for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this little free card class. And Late Night Lori is saying good night. Until next time, happy stamping.